What if Viking bedrooms held darker secrets than their battlefields? We think of axes and longships, but few ever talk about what happened behind closed longhouse doors. The truth, some of the most shocking sexual customs in Viking society weren't just wild, they were terrifying. From ritual intimacy to public humiliation, fertility rites, and taboo-breaking relationships, even between men, Norse culture blurred the lines between power, pleasure, and punishment. Their laws were strict, their urges were not, and what they considered sacred might leave you speechless today. Before we dive in, drop a comment with the time you're watching this. I love knowing when you time travel into history with us. And if you're drawn to the raw, hidden truths, history class, skip no pressure, but subscribing keeps the fire burning. Now brace yourself, because what you're about to hear would never make it into a school textbook. You trudge through a moss-strewn path at dusk, the sky painted in bruised purples, until the great longhouse made of timber turf and secrets rises before you. Inside benches line a central hearth where warriors toast mead and skalds recite sagas, but beneath the raucous laughter and the clatter of wooden tankards, another kind of heat simmers. In these communal halls, rooms weren't divided by drywall or VIP ropes. Privacy was a luxury scrounged with a scrap of wool, or the clever misdirection of a busy evening feast. Imagine your college dorm. Everyone knows your business, and your only lock is a woven tapestry. By lantern light pairs drift into shadowy corners, behind poles, under the overhang of rafters, or in silent niches near the smoke hole. You crane your neck to catch a whisper, or the rustle of furs, and suddenly you're a detective in an unsolved mystery of forbidden embraces. Elders encouraged communal living for warmth and defense, but no one wrote rules against stolen kisses behind the king's drinking bench. Did you ever think Vikings were all stern-faced warriors impervious to temptation? Think again. Your fingertips brush the rough-hewn bench where a young shield-bearer once pressed her back against the wall, heart-pounding as someone slipped a hand beneath her cloak. The rush of adrenaline there rivals any battlefield triumph. Only here the victory is hidden behind a bellowing feast and a curt nod to the chieftain. You wonder, wouldn't it be easier just to find a private cabin? But that's precisely the point. Secrecy added spice. Maybe you've swapped conspiratorial glances at a crowded party, searching for one person who understands. The Vikings just did it by torchlight. At times, the tension peaked so high that laughter became a code. A sudden burst of giggles might signal an embrace in the rafters. A loud toast could camouflage a stolen touch. You might spot a guest abruptly emptying their cup at the hearth, an elegant exit strategy, or a signal that the aisle between benches is free for another tryst. Feel the warmth of the hearth on your cheek. Hear the crackle of burning birch. Imagine the thrill of dancing between duty and desire. In one tale, a farmer's daughter used a fallen shield as a makeshift screen, propping it against a pillar to hide behind. The shield once used to fend off marauders now served to protect a tender liaison. You can almost sense the irony, a tool of war transformed into a temple of privacy. Could you resist a moment like that? Would you dare lean in, trusting that flimsy barrier against discovery? Yet not every forbidden meeting ended in whispered vows. Some ended abruptly, an accidental nap robe falling a servant stumbling in to refill ale. The risk of public embarrassment loomed large fines, forced marriages, or a good old scolding before the entire household. But when the cost of discovery equals a stiff penalty, The thrill becomes a story worth telling around future hearths. Think of modern dating apps where every message teeters between excitement and dread, except your swipes happen in woolen tunics by firelight. By the time the central fire embers glow dull orange and the last mead sipper nods off the longhouse exhales, the corridors smell of smoke and linen, and faint echoes of stolen promises linger in hidden alcoves. You step outside into the cool night, the hush pressed close like a lover's breath, aware that within these walls half-remembered secrets pulse beneath the floorboards. You slip into a smaller side chamber off the main hall, where the air is cooler, and the flicker of a lone torch casts elongated shadows on the wooden walls. Here the boundaries of attraction blur, and you find whispers of same-sex affection that challenge the battle-hardened stereotypes. In a culture that prized prowess with axe and spear, it might surprise you to learn that love between men and between women was quietly woven into everyday life, tolerated in certain contexts, yet condemned in others. Imagine two shield bearers resting after the day's march, their armor set aside, leaning close enough that the scent of heated iron and pine-lacquered wood mingles with the warmth of their breath. They exchange jokes about spear practice, but beneath the surface lingers something more tender. You might catch a lingering hand on a shoulder blade, or the curve of a smile that lasts too long. In a society where masculinity was gauged by one's readiness for combat, these moments of affection were acts of courage in their own right, daring to care when the world demanded you stay tough. Historical records offer tantalizing hints. A 12th century saga mentions two men so devoted they shared a bed in their youth, earning jest and censure in equal measure. You picture them as early influencers redefining the notion of loyalty beyond the clan oath. Didn't that remind you of friendships that felt deeper than most relationships? Times when you turned to someone of the same gender for comfort rather than competition. Those Viking hearts beat much the same way. Yet the social attitudes were paradoxical. On one hand, Norse law codes forbade ergi, a term denoting unmanly or passive behavior, implying that certain expressions of same-sex intimacy were taboo and punishable by fines or public shame. On the other hand, it's clear that erotic art on bracteates and carved bone depict scenes of male pairs in close embrace, suggesting a more permissive undercurrent. You're left wondering, was it the act itself or the perceived role of dominance that governed acceptance? Perhaps it was akin to gossiping about a friend's choice of karaoke song. Embarrassing if you weren't in the right mood, but surprisingly, common behind closed doors. When women were involved, the picture grows even more fascinating. Village women often worked side by side milking goats, weaving cloth, preparing feasts, developing bonds that sometimes crossed into romantic territory. A traveler's tale from the British Isles notes two farm wives who swore an oath of sisterhood so deep it rivaled marriage vows. You can almost hear their laughter as they traded secrets over curdled milk and wool-spun blankets. Doesn't that sound like sleepovers you had in childhood, where truth or dare could spiral into declarations of friendship and something more? But discretion was paramount. Imagine carrying a carved token, a small bone pendant etched with symbols of intertwined serpents, meant as a secret signal to a beloved lurking in the rafters. If discovered, you faced mockery at best, a swift legal hearing at worst. The Viking mind prized honor, and to be labeled effeminate or dishonorable could tarnish one's standing forever. You'd guard your reputation as fiercely as your sword, aware that trust once broken was hard to reclaim. Occasionally, these hidden affairs surfaced in the sagas with tragic flair. In one story, a chieftain's nephew, driven by forbidden love, defied his uncle to elope with another man's daughter, prompting a violent feud that spilled blood across two villages. You sense the irony. Love intended to bridge souls, instead igniting the very conflicts the Vikings claimed to detest. It's a reminder that even the strongest bonds can be tested by societal pressure and familial duty. How often have you found love at odds with tradition, forcing you to choose between acceptance and belonging? Despite the risks, same-sex communities formed in subtle ways. Travelers spoke of discreet gatherings in coastal settlement outposts like Hedeby, where sailors swapped sea shanties laced with double meanings and flirted under the guise of sharing navigational tales. You might liken it to an underground book club or a late-night cafe, meet-up places where people could drop their guard and speak in code to those who understood. This covert network offered solace in a world where open confession could lead to exile or worse. As dawn approaches and the torch guttering in the corner signals the end of the clandestine vigil, you step back into the main hall's glory, feeling both exhilarated and pensive. The contrast between the open revelry around you and the hushed confessions you've witnessed feels like watching two sides of a tapestry, one vibrant and loud, the other delicate and hidden. The next mystery awaits just beyond the threshold. You crouch by a smoldering brazier in a secluded corner of the longhouse, feeling the heat tug at your cloak as you examine two objects laid out on a low wooden table: a jagged piece of driftwood etched with swirling runes, and a leather-bound pouch of herbs scented with juniper and mugwort. The runic charm, carved by a rune master's steady hand, promises to woo even the most guarded heart, its lines tracing the shape of intertwined serpent symbols of both protection and passion. You trace the grooves with your fingertip, imagining the thrill of slipping this talisman under a pillow or weaving it into a beloved's belt. Meanwhile, the cider ritual, the realm of the vulva or seeress, entails a very different flavor of desire. You close your eyes and let the soft drone of her chant wash over you, a rhythmic cadence that feels part lullaby, part incantation. She rings a bronze bell, its clear notes slicing through the smoky air, and raises a staff crowned with plaited wolf's fur. Herbs burn in a neighboring brazier, their perfume thick and hallucinatory. With every flourish of her cloak, you feel the air shift, as if invisible threads are weaving between stranger and stranger, sparking unnoticed longing. The runes offer a tangible promise. Wear me, carry me, and hearts will bend, their literal instructions carved deep into wood or bone. You can hold them, pass them between trembling fingers, and believe that a whispered word at midnight will ignite passion. But the runic root requires stealth. You must steal away to carve the symbol in secret, or slip the finished charm into unsuspecting hands. Imagine gifting a tiny heart-shaped cameo today, but instead of a photograph, it bears ancient letters that threaten to unsettle the boundary between consent and compulsion. Seder, in contrast, is performance. You become part of a communal spectacle under the open night sky or in a grove of sacred trees. The vulva invokes gods, and land spirits weave gestures and words into a tapestry of suggestion so potent that participants leave altered hearts, racing cheeks aflame. You might compare it to a modern music festival's hypnotic beat, where thousands connect through sound and movement, but here the currency is attraction itself. It's not about tricking someone into love, but about releasing buried emotions, sometimes with unpredictable results. Both methods carried risk. Miscast runes could draw unwanted attention a bride might awaken, to find her fiancé entranced by someone else, estranged by the very charm meant to bind him. Likewise, a cedar ceremony gone awry could leave participants haunted by nightmares or unsettled glances, as if the boundary between waking and dreaming, and desire and dread, had collapsed. You wonder how often these experiments ended in laughter and shared tales versus whispered confessions of regret around future fires. You imagine a young farmhand discovering a rune-inscribed token beneath his mother's spindle, his heart fluttering with curiosity, and then attending a midnight cedar rite led by the elderly vulva, Gudrid, whose hair is white as birch bark and whose eyes seem to peer into your very bones. She intones a blessing that tingles in your chest, awakening long dormant feelings for your childhood friend. Didn't you once feel a sudden jolt of emotion for someone you barely noticed before the Vikings simply had magic to explain that spark? Runes and cedar weren't only for attracting lovers, they also bound communities. A successful ritual strengthened bonds within the household, signaling cooperation between chieftain and vulva, rune master and poet. Desire became a shared currency, traded and transformed in rituals that blended the erotic with the sacred. You inhale the scent of smoldering juniper and driftwood and realize that magic and desire have always been entwined, whether in a candlelit ceremony or a lover's whispered promise. Stepping away from the smoky fragrance of magic, you find yourself drawn to the clang of steel and the soft rustle of leather as shield maidens prepare for patrol outside the longhouse. Their armor polished to a dull gleam hints at fierce prowess, yet beneath the metal plates lies a heartbeat that races with secrets of its own. In the dim light, you notice one woman adjusting the strap on another's bracer, a gesture more intimate than any comrade's handshake. Their shared look carries the weight of unspoken vows, and you realize these warriors wielded more than just swords. These shield maidens, women who took up arms alongside men, created rare pockets of autonomy. After a skirmish, they'd wash in the same stream, the cool water, revealing damp hair clinging to bare shoulders. It's here, between the closing of chainmail rings and the drying of woolen tunics, that clandestine romances often blossomed. Imagine your closest friend from a sports team, the one you cheered with after every game, only there beside you in armor, sharing half a loaf of bread and half a heartbeat. In one saga, a shield maiden named Hervor confided in her comrade Brynhild, "My sword may be sharp, but my heart bleeds for you." Their bond, chronicled in stanzas that blend honor with longing, reads like a modern love letter tattooed on leather. You can almost hear the skald's cadence, a slow, deliberate beat, matching the quiet drip of spring thaw. Didn't you ever misinterpret a teammate's hand on your shoulder as mere encouragement, only to discover something deeper simmering beneath? Not all of these relationships fit neatly into heroic ballads. Rumors whisper of pairs sneaking away to pluck wildflowers beside the fjord, weaving garlands and placing them in each other's hair. One day, a priestess on a pilgrimage spotted two shield maidens weaving crowns of yarrow, their laughter echoing off granite cliffs. She shook her head at their audacity and perhaps envied the freedom they found in each other's arms. You might recall stumbling upon a couple at a campsite, their sleeping bags zipped together under canvas skies, oblivious to the world. Yet public acknowledgement remained perilous. A chieftain's proclamation that no warrior shall dishonor the clan by succumbing to idle whispers carried teeth. Should a pair's affection become too visible, like a clasped hand peeking between shield and thigh, they risked reassignment to menial tasks or outright exile. The tension between duty and desire sharpened every stolen moment. You feel that same thrill when slipping away from a crowded event to share a private conversation, acutely aware that discovery would mean scrutiny, if not scorn. Modern parallels aren't far off. Think of women in historically male-dominated professions, fighter pilots, or firefighters finding camaraderie that edges into romance. Their trials echo those of Viking shield maidens, questioned competence rumors of favoritism and the need for secrecy. The Viking past mirrors our present, reminding you that love often finds a way through barriers of expectation. Occasionally, alliances formed beyond romantic ties. A shield maiden might take a young recruit under her wing, guiding her through drills and sharing rations by torchlight. Over time, a deeper connection emerged, calls for honor intertwined with calls of passion. In one coastal skirmish, two warriors defended a merchant's caravan together, their synchronized shield wall movements almost poetic. After the battle, a local scribe noted how one kissed the other's scar from a stray arrow stitching love and violence into the same tapestry. You shiver at the image death and desire dancing side by side. Despite the risks, some pairs chose to formalize their bond. In a remote settlement, a custom evolved where a shield maiden could pledge herself to another woman in a ceremony by the ocean's edge. Their hands clasped around a shared horn of ale, and a local elder invoked the gods for loyalty rather than the usual spoils of war. News of this rite traveled like gossip carried by traders to distant markets in Byzantium and beyond. You might compare it to a commitment ceremony. Today, legal recognition might be absent, but the emotional depth shone just as brightly. As the night deepens and the torches gutter low, you slip away from the training yard, where armor rests on racks like silent sentinels. The scent of sea salt clings to your cloak, and gentle waves whisper against wooden pilings. In the hush, you carry with you the image of two warriors side by side, in battle and in bed defying norms and forging love amidst chaos. You tiptoe through the twilight-shaded grove, where the temple to Freya stands, its wooden pillars carved with looping vines and feline motifs, and slip past hooded acolytes polishing bronze chalices. Inside, the air hums with incense and whispered prayers, the fragrance of pine resin and honeyed wax clinging to your tunic. Here, devotion isn't limited to song and sacrifice. It spills into the flesh. At the altar, a priestess draped in saffron silk invites supplicants to offer libations in exchange for blessings of fertility and passion. You watch as a wide-eyed farmer pours mead into a shallow basin, then bends to kiss the rim before pressing his lips to the priestess's hand. Their contact lingers, a ritualized touch that blurs the line between spiritual petition and carnal plea. Have you ever bowed your head in front of someone only to feel your heartbeat stick out like a flute solo in a quiet room? Women and men approach the statue of Freya, goddess of love and war, in equal measure. Some leave tokens of braided hair. Others slip rings engraved with hearts into nearby offering boxes. A pair of twin sisters kneel side by side, their heads close, placing matching wreaths of marigold at the goddess's feet. You imagine their vow, "May our bond mirror yours." It's like today's symbolic friendship bracelets, but here the stakes feel higher as if the threads could unravel your destiny. The high priest, his beard flecked with ash chants, invocations that echo across the temple's wooden ceiling, each word punctuated by the clink of ceremonial daggers tapping bronze shields. Participants exchange lingering glances, and you sense unspoken permission within these sacred walls. Desire itself becomes an offering. One traveler's journal notes how a young couple, after completing the rite, slipped into the priest's quarters to consummate their vows under a moonlit skylight. The act, framed as divine communion, felt less like rebellion and more like fulfilling a cosmic contract. Yet public shame still lurked at the edges. If a supplicant pressed too eagerly, slipping a hand beneath another's garment rather than over a chalice, they risked being branded impious. Norse law frowned on oving yodi, or excessive song which included forbidden moans within a house of worship. The fine A required sacrifice of livestock and public apology. You shudder at the thought of standing in front of your neighbors, admitting that your attempt at passion offended the gods. Ever felt that twinge of embarrassment when you realized you'd overshared on social media? In some coastal temples, the ritual spread across seasons. During Yule festivities, participants performed a leaker, a playful enactment of fertility myths, complete with masked dancers doubling as deities, coupling in symbolic union. You might picture a Renaissance fair's medieval role play, but here, the actors believed they channeled actual divine forces. When the final drumbeat died, couples paired off for private blessings behind tapestry screens, fingers tracing runic symbols on bare flesh before dusk surrendered to dawn. Real historical voices emerge in skaldic poetry. One verse credits a famed priestess, Helga the White, with blessing a lord's marriage after he brought her a blossom of fevered intent and a vow that judged death. You can almost see Helga's knowing smile as she traced the runes of binding on his arm, guiding him toward a night he'd never forget. Does that sound a bit like surrendering to a first date's fluttering excitement? Modern parallels peek through. Think of a candlelit ceremony, where couples light unity candles and share vows, then slip away for a private dance in a hidden alcove. The shape of human longing hasn't changed. The venue has simply shifted from mead-scented sanctuaries to banquet halls with mood lighting. Yet there's a rawer edge here. You're not just saying "I do." You're invoking gods of love to seal the bond. Not every ritual ended in bliss. Occasional tales tell of a lover's refusal to partake fully in the rite, holding back a kiss at the threshold and being struck by lightning on the journey home. A stark reminder that the gods demanded wholehearted surrender. You shiver picturing your own half-hearted wave at a friend's wedding, ending in awkward silence rather than divine retribution. When the final chant fades and the coals in the brazier smolder, you slip out into the cool forest night, your skin tingling as if still touched by unseen hands. The temple recedes behind you, but the memory of sacred bodies pressed close lingers, guiding you toward another realm of intimacy. Even as the grove falls silent, the thought of lingering warmth invites you onward to where steam and secrecy merge in another intimate space. You push open the heavy wooden door of the bathhouse, and a wave of humid warmth envelops you as if the very air were steeped in steam. The room glows amber from oil lamps reflected in water, pooled between carved stone benches. Steam coils around the wooden beams overhead, and the scent of juniper branches smoldering in a corner mingles with the faint tang of sweat and soap. Here, hygiene serves as pretext. What really draws bodies together is the absence of armor and the hush that replaces the longhouse's clamor. Bare skin glistens under the lamplight shoulders, thighs back slick with water. Erasing the markers of rank and prowess, you settle onto a bench, feeling the heat seep into your bones, and watch as pairs drift closer. A goldsmith's apprentice reclines beside a wealthy trader's wife, their conversation hushed, yet charged bodies angled, just so that shoulders brush and pulses quicken. It's easy to imagine these benches as modern hot tubs where strangers become intimate under the guise of relaxation. Have you ever noticed how a spa's hush invites secrets you'd never share in a coffee shop? Water laps gently against stone steps, and you hear a stifled laugh as two young siblings splatter each other. Only they're not siblings, but lovers disguising their affair behind childhood play. A deft splash of water over the face serves as a playful veil, allowing a secret kiss, while others demolish gossip over brimming bowls of barley porridge. The bathhouse's communal layout, a central pool surrounded by low partitions, creates just enough privacy for a stolen embrace without isolating the participants completely. Imagine Midwestern sauna culture, where the veneer of modesty masks a ticket to clandestine encounters. In one coastal settlement, a visiting Viking skald described the bathhouse as where men shed swords but not desires, noting a bronze mirror left behind in the steam chamber, its surface fractured from heat and use. Legend says the mirror once bore 3 etched hearts, a love triangle revealed only when the fog cleared. You can almost see the ripple of steam parting to reveal a hand breathlessly pressed against another's thigh, a moment suspended between longing and potential scandal. Doesn't that remind you of finding a forgotten Polaroid in an old jacket pocket, sparking memories and questions you weren't ready to answer? Yet the steam also served as cover for more than tender liaisons. Rival clans used the bathhouse as a neutral meeting ground, negotiating alliances over shared towels. But sometimes those negotiations turned erotic. You might picture diplomats in a luxury resort, agreements inked beside plush furniture, except here, deals were sealed with urgent whispers in shadowed corners. If a diplomat's handshake lingered too long, a hidden blade might follow in the cloakroom. If a romantic tryst were discovered, the offender might face a fine in beaver pelts or public rebuke in the market square. The line between negotiation and seduction blurred as readily as the steam. Occasionally, the bathhouse masked darker exchanges, hired companions dispatched by chieftains to entertain visiting nobles. These women and men, paid in fine cloth or rare amber beads, performed dances in shallow water before leaning in to share secrets gathered from overheard conversations. Their job was to entice and record a blend of pleasure and espionage. You can almost hear their laughter echo as they slip messages beneath the foam of a floating wreath. It's the ancient equivalent of social media influencers gathering intel at glamorous events, turning compliments into currency. Despite the consensual atmosphere, boundaries remained. A hand strayed too boldly, and a harsh cough from another bather could signal disapproval, or worse, a guard summoned to escort the offender out. Norse etiquette demanded respect for the communal space, and violations risked exclusion from this precious haven. Imagine a crowded gym locker room where even a stray glance can trigger discomfort audits. Here the stakes felt higher, the door's heavy thud, a warning of exile from one of society's few egalitarian retreats. As you towel off by the bathhouse's exit, your muscles humming from the heat, you notice the water's surface still shimmering with ripples of past encounters. The mingling of bodies, warm, vulnerable, and unguarded, lingers in your thoughts, a reminder that intimacy thrives wherever barriers fall. Stepping into the night's cool air, you feel the contrast keenly, from steam-drenched closeness to the crisp hush of darkness. Ahead lies a realm even more unsettling, where legends of animal liaisons beckon you toward taboo territories. The scent of peat smoke still clings to your cloak as you approach the edge of the settlement, where rumors twist through alleys like wild briars, and every hushed whisper drips with dread. Tales speak of men and women accused of unnatural acts, with beast stories so lurid they could curdle mead. You step into the dim glow of a moot ring, where elders debate not just land disputes, but charges of ornitharg, a sin deemed so abominable it threatened the very fabric of honor. In one chilling account, a farmhand named Halvor stood before the assembly, shivering in his undyed tunic, as neighbors pointed accusing fingers. The claim he'd been caught in the straw, with a goat at dusk, the animal's frightened bleats echoing through the hayloft. The penalty? A. Fine of 10 cows, or lifelong shunning, no mead in feast halls, no shelter in winter storms. You sense the edge of fear in Halvor's eyes, aware that livelihoods depended on reputation as much as harvest yields. Contrast that with the mythic sagas where gods and giants blur the line between human and beast. In one poem, the shape-shifting giantess Skadi seduces a stag on a moonlit plain, her desire painted as divine whimsy rather than moral decay. Listeners would huddle by the fire, heartbeats matching the crackle of embers, debating whether this tale celebrated transformation or warned of hubris. Doesn't it remind you of modern urban legends that thrive on ambiguity? Did you ever lean in closer to hear if the ghost was real? Yet culture and law march different paths. The Ynglinga saga recounts a king who boasted of taming wild wolves, handing out animal pelts as tokens of favor after mating rites in the forest. To his court, this was courage. To neighboring chieftains, a scandalous break with propriety. You imagine a CEO's bizarre retreat that earns praise in one circle and bewilderment in another. Fear of bestiality accusations ran so deep that sometimes innocent gestures were misconstrued. A herder's daughter, kneeling to soothe a wounded foal, could be charged with impropriety if townsfolk spread gossip faster than ravens in flight. The mere sight of human and animal skin, pressed together, whether to comfort or sustain, became fodder for moral panic. You recall how a single tweeted image today can spark outrage and cancel culture long before facts surface. Punishments varied by rank. A thrall found guilty might be executed swiftly, his body abandoned beyond the village bounds. A noble, however, faced symbolic exile, stripped of titles, sent to serve another clan, and forced to sleep on the solid ground rather than fur-lined benches. Imagine being demoted from your dream job and told never to return home. How hollow a winter without hearth or kin. Despite the harsh judgments, some clandestine liaisons persisted in superstition-shrouded groves. A whispered network believed certain creatures carried blessings. Mating with a swan under a willow might cure barrenness, or coupling with an otter at dawn could grant swift healing powers. You shiver as you picture early medical research, a hopeful remedy tangled with taboo like underground experiments in stolen labs today. In time, Christianity's arrival stiffened moral codes. Priests condemned bestiality as sin against God's natural order, preaching from wooden pulpits that such acts invited divine wrath and plague. Stone churches replaced open groves, and confessionals replaced frank debate. You think of how societal shifts reshape taboos and wonder which modern stigmas might be reshaped by tomorrow's tide. Gossip never truly died. Decades later, skalds still sneer in hushed verses about a lord's forebear, he who loved the hound more than kin, weaving cautionary tales over ale-soaked benches. These verses became morality plays, reminding you that stories outlast statutes embalmed in memory long after laws are forgotten. Across time, the fear of accusation proved as potent as the act itself. Even whispers could corrode trust, and the threat of exile kept many desires locked behind silent doors. But in the hush of midnight, as you turn from the moot ring and feel the frost bite your cheeks, you sense that not all taboos could hold back curiosity. You settle onto a worn bench in a timbered hall, the echoes of hammering ale cups fading as the skald raises his voice. His words curl around you like smoke, each line dripping with innuendo, as he recites a verse about forbidden liaisons under moonlit sails. These skaldic poets were the rock stars of their day, spinning yarns that balanced on the edge of scandal. You can almost hear the crowd lean in breath, held waiting for the next metaphor that teases rather than tells. One popular stanza warns of a chieftain who melted like wax beneath her touch, a line so cunningly crafted that no one could be sure whether it praised heroic love or mocked a boastful warrior. You picture that warrior broad-shouldered, with a helmet under one arm, blushing like a teenager forced to perform karaoke. Have you ever overheard a song lyric in a bar and thought, "Are you talking about me?" The Vikings did the same, except their songs carried the weight of honor and reputation. Skalds used kennings, those layered metaphors that hid meaning in riddles. A lover's fingers might become oak-rooted crescents, and a stolen kiss dragonfire spark. Listeners nodded knowingly, decoding each kenning like a secret handshake. If you ever felt a thrill deciphering slang in a text message, imagine doing it by torchlight, when one misheard word could ignite laughter or insult. The poetry was performance art, and gossip rolled into one. Every couple in the room felt the risk of recognition. Real names sometimes appeared. One skald playfully referred to Brother Gunnar of Hrafn's Fjord as the Swan Cuddler, referencing a whispered affair with the Jarl's daughter after a feast. Word traveled fast. The same night farmhands choked on mead as pages tried to erase the name from the scroll before delivering it to the chieftain. You sense the tension a poem that entertains can also betray. It's like watching someone tag a name on a public wall knowing every passerby will see it. Women weren't exempt. You hear a lament for Freydis the Fair, whose beauty was said to launch 100 longships and 100 hearts. One verse implies she seduced a visiting trader, then sent him home empty-handed and empty-hearted. The skald delivered the line with a wry smirk, and you can almost hear the titter of admiration and envy mixing like mead and water. Doesn't it remind you of a viral post about a celebrity crush? Everyone knows the story, but only a few know the real details. These tales served as warnings and titillations. A poem could celebrate loyalty. Two souls bound by braids of gold or lampoon infidelity. His bed burned colder than winter fjord. Audiences reacted with cheers or jeers, and the skald's reputation rose or fell on that reaction. It's reminiscent of stand-up comedy today, where one ill-timed joke can clear the room or secure a standing ovation. Skaldic poetry also preserved local scandals for posterity. Centuries later, historians uncovered verses about a stormy night when a lord's wife slipped away to join a ship's carpenter on deck. The waves drowned out her laughter, but not the echoes of her choice. Archaeologists found that very deck plank carved with the phrase Midnight's Favor, a testament that love stories, even salacious ones, can survive time. You ponder how future generations might interpret today's tweets and memes. In that hush between stanzas, you notice glances passing among listeners, knowing looks that say, I've heard that one too. The poetry awakens a sense of both belonging and danger. You're part of a community with shared secrets, yet you risk revealing your own. As the skald's voice softens, you realize that every whispered metaphor and every coded reference paved the way for the next intoxicating chapter of Viking lore. And as the final echo of horn and harp fades into the rafters, you rise from the bench, heart warmed by stories of love and betrayal alike, ready to explore how these passions intertwined with power in the world beyond the hall. You weave through the bustling mead hall once more, where laughter mingles with the clang of drinking horns, and your eyes catch the subtle nods exchanged between noble and vassal. Here alliances hinge not on blood alone, but on favors traded in whispered corridors, a promise of bedroom discretion in exchange for a shield in battle, or a private knight's company sealing a pact that no contract could bind. Imagine the chieftain's daughter cloaked beneath a velvet mantle, slipping quietly to meet a visiting earl in a dimly lit gallery. In return for her attentions, she demands grain shipments to her father's storerooms, a deal more binding than any oath sworn over burning embers. You've seen office politics today, where promotions follow clandestine lunches. The Vikings simply used softer pledges of intimacy to cement their power. Sexual favors weren't confined to the elite. A skilled blacksmith might carve a beautiful sword for a lord's favorite maiden, expecting more than gratitude in return. The sword, its hilt wrapped in crimson leather, became a symbol of their contract, its edge both literal and figurative in slicing through rivals' ambitions. Does that echo any of your own experiences, where gifts carry expectations you can't quite ignore? Even the holy rituals weren't immune. A priestess of Freya might withhold blessings of fertility unless her suitor agreed to particular nocturnal services, an unspoken tithe of flesh for divine favor. It's a stark reminder that power and desire often dance a delicate tango, each step balancing advantage against vulnerability. You think of modern influencers who tie exclusive content to subscription fees, intimacy packaged as currency. This barter extended to the battlefield. Young warriors eager for glory and loot sometimes offered themselves to seasoned captains seeking mentorship that came with more than tactical lessons. In return for guidance and favor in raids, they provided companionship that blurred lines between devotion and duty. Consider today's internships, where the promise of career advancement can lead to complicated personal entanglements. The context changes, but the human heart remains much the same. Rank-shaped consequences. A lowly thrall caught promising sexual service to a free man risked branding or sale. Meanwhile, a noble offering the same risked only a bruised ego or a rival's scandalous song whispered across courts. The imbalance underlined how power could shield one from fallout, leaving those lower down to bear the burden of rumor and reprisal. Doesn't that make you question how privilege still insulates some today? Real-life tales survive in the sagas. One story recounts a jarl who hosted foreign diplomats and demanded their envoys' secret consort bars lowered to a private chamber before negotiating peace. The envoy, cornered between loyalty to homeland and desire for safe passage, acquiesced. The peace treaty that emerged bore terms favorable only to the Jarl's clan, a clear example of how sexual leverage shaped geopolitics. You're reminded of historical leaders whose personal liaisons influenced treaties and wars. Yet these arrangements weren't purely transactional. Bonds sometimes deepened into genuine affection, and lovers turned negotiators found unexpected solace in each other's arms. There's a recorded poem celebrating a vassal's loyalty, born of love rather than fear, his devotion unbreakable, because it was founded on shared passion. You might compare it to a mentor-mentee relationship that blossomed into friendship, one that lasts long after the original goals are achieved. As torches gutter and the hall's din grows hushed, you realize that every secret favor traded under those beams wove a tapestry of influence that rippled far beyond the longhouse walls. The threads of desire and power cross-hatch to shape entire communities, reminding you that behind every throne and every merchant's stand lies an untold story of intimacy negotiated in shadows. You tread along a winding path of memory, each step echoing the echoes of whispered desires and clandestine meetings, until you arrive at the storied halls where legends linger. Here skalds still recite the tales of those who dared to love beyond norms and travelers. Pause to ask, did that really happen? The longhouse walls absorb every secret, and over generations these stories fused into the very identity of the Viking world. Consider the ballad of Freydis the Bold, whose passionate liaisons with both men and women earned her a reputation as both warrior and temptress. Mothers told her story to caution daughters about unchecked yearning, while young lovers invoked her name in hopes of courage. Even today, you might hear her name in a whisper as a symbol of fearless devotion, proof that legends of lust can empower as much as they scandalize. Meanwhile, the sagas of betraying lovers like the Jarl, who abandoned his bride for a foreign maiden, became cautionary epics. His castle's stones still bear his name, but local fishermen tell a different tale, that the sea itself claimed his fortune in wrath for his infidelity. You sense how these narratives morphed over centuries, blending fact with moral lessons until the line between history and myth dissolved like chalk and rain. Doesn't that remind you of how urban legends grow, each retelling, adding a flourish, until you can't separate truth from embellishment? These lustful legends traveled far beyond Scandinavia. Merchants carried them to distant markets, poets translated them for courts in Byzantium, and scribes in Christian monasteries rewrote them as warnings against carnality. Each retelling reshaped the tale, sometimes softening, often sensationalizing to suit the audience's appetite. You can almost hear a Venetian noble recounting a Viking love duel over a goblet of wine, his voice thick with intrigue. Over time, the fixation on erotic exploits overshadowed other aspects of Viking life. In the modern imagination, the Norse are often reduced to berserkers and brothels, as if the breadth of their culture fits neatly between lust and slaughter. Yet beneath the headlines of scandal lies a nuanced tapestry of human-longing ritual and resilience. You feel both amused and sobered by how sensational stories can eclipse deeper truths, much like clickbait headlines that drown out substantive discourse today. Archaeological finds continue to spark debate. A surprisingly intimate set of bone combs, etched with erotic imagery, surfaced in a burial mound, challenging assumptions about decorum in death. Did these carvings mark a lover's grave, or serve as protective charms in the afterlife? The vase's broken edge suggests a hurried burial, perhaps a clandestine farewell. You imagine unearthing your own ancestors' secrets someday, and discovering that the family legend of austere stoicism hides a scandalous subplot. Today's reenactors and historical novelists lean into these legends, weaving them into immersive experiences at living history museums and best-selling sagas. Visitors to reconstructed villages find themselves drawn to the whispered tours that reveal the real Vikings, not only raiders, but romantics, magicians, and schemers. It's as if the past reaches across a millennium, prodding you to reconsider what you think you know. Have you ever attended a themed festival and realized the performers' stories spoke more to you than the official exhibits? As twilight deepens into starlit night, you wander back toward a longhouse where torches flicker like memories rekindled. The air hums with the legacy of those who loved, wildly defied taboos, and wove their passions into song and stone. These legends endure not because they're salacious, but because they speak to something eternal, the intertwining of power and vulnerability, the dance between risk and reward, and the universal craving to be known and remembered. You step inside, feeling the soft glow of embers and the settled hush of shared secrets. The longhouse breathes around you, its timbers pulsing with stories both forgotten and forever alive. In that moment, you realize that the most enduring legacy isn't conquest or craft. It's the human heart daring to seek connection against all odds. You're not born with a name not right away. You arrive squalling into a longhouse walled with axe-hewn logs, the air thick with smoke and sweat, and the faint scent of dried fish. Outside, the wind howls like a hungry spirit across the frozen fjord, but inside, the fire crackles, and an old woman mutters blessings over your still slick head. You're a Viking child now, though no one uses that word. You are simply a child of the North, and life has already begun its hard negotiations with you. Your first bed is a pile of sheepskins on a raised wooden board. It's warm, sort of. But you don't sleep alone. There's usually a sibling curled beside you, maybe even a dog. Privacy isn't really a thing. If you sneeze, someone blesses you. If you cry too long, someone tells you to hush before the ancestors get annoyed. There's no gentle mobile spinning above your crib, no lullaby unless you count your mother, humming a dirge about a drowned fisherman. The food picture: cold, chewy bits of dried cod and sour goat milk. If you're lucky, a few berries in the summer. If you're really lucky, your father returns from a raid with some exotic prize like honey or salt. You learn early that sweet things are rare and therefore magical. It's a childhood built on scarcity and resilience. Want to play with a toy? Here, take this stick. Want to pretend you're a hero? Then grab a wooden sword and try not to poke out your cousin's eye. By the time you're 5 or 6, you've figured out some of the basics. Rule 1: never show weakness. Stub your toe. Shake it off. Get scratched by a goat. Laugh, even if it's bleeding. Emotions are treated like untrained animals, useful when disciplined, dangerous when not. Your elders don't coddle, they shape. Your mother teaches you stories of Odin sacrificing an eye, of Loki's tricks, of Freya's fierce beauty. But these are not fairy tales. These are blueprints. There's a phrase that crops up a lot: bitter weather builds strong bones, which is a poetic way of saying, stop whining. The North doesn't have patience for softness. Even fun has a hard edge. Games often involve wrestling, snow rolling, or smacking each other with sticks until someone gives up or gets distracted by a bird. And somehow, even that is considered good training. Your house isn't quiet, not really. Your parents speak in quick, practical tones. The longhouse creaks, the animals grunt, and someone's always coughing. But in the quieter moments, those long, blue-lit winter afternoons, you eavesdrop on the elders' tales. That's when you first hear the word berserker. It tingles when you hear it. The story says they're warriors who fight without armor, possessed by animal rage, immune to pain. You ask your uncle if that's real. He just grins and says, "You'll see." At night you dream of it. Not the rage, but the fearlessness. The idea of becoming something more than human, something the gods would pause to notice. You don't quite understand what it means yet, but it grows in your chest, like a coal. Not quite fire, but it wants to be. Of course, the practical side of life is less dreamy. There's work, endless work. You help haul water from the frozen stream, learn to scrape hides and shovel goat droppings into a pit. If you're a boy, they hand you a tiny hatchet and show you how to chop firewood. If you're a girl, they hand you a knife and show you how to gut fish. Either way, the smell sticks to your fingers for days. And still, there's pride in it. These are the things that earn respect. Quiet, grudging nods from adults who don't hand out praise easily. One day, you see a neighbor's son slip and cry when a log lands on his foot. No one helps him. Later, they mock him behind the smokehouse. Not because they hate him, but because they want him to be better, or harder, or both. Once a year, a trader might pass through. His clothes are weird. He smells like spices. He tells you about places like Constantinople and Baghdad. You don't believe half of what he says, but you listen anyway. And when he leaves, you stare out at the fjord and feel the itch of curiosity. You don't know it yet, but that's part of the path too. Rage is only one side of a berserker. The other is wonder. By your 7th winter, you've already seen things that would freeze the blood of modern suburban parents. A man losing 2 fingers in a wood-cutting accident, a funeral where the dead were burned on a pyre, and a fight that ended with someone's tooth embedded in the wall. No one flinches. Life here is short, raw, and painfully honest. And you're starting to get the hang of it. That old woman who muttered over your head when you were born, she's still around. Sometimes she watches you from the corner of the hearth with her one clouded eye. You ask her, "Do you think I'll be strong?" She doesn't answer right away. Then she says, "That depends. Can you control the fire before it controls you?" It's not the answer you want, but it's the one you'll remember. The axe they give you isn't sharp. Not yet. It's more of a clunky iron wedge than a weapon, but you don't complain. This is your first tool of transformation, and they're not interested in ease. They're interested in how you handle the weight. You're still small wrists, barely thicker than the haft, but you learn to grip it like your life depends on it. Because someday it will. They don't teach you how to fight right away. First, you learn how to fall, over and over, into snowbanks, into gravel, into mud. You slip, you roll, you smack your ribs into logs. The older boys laugh, and your teacher, a man with more scars than teeth, tells you only a dead man falls without learning something. You hate him briefly. Then you start to understand what he means. There's no official training hall, just a clearing in the forest and a handful of hardened men and women who once knew the fury you're trying to grasp. Some of them were berserkers. Others were smart enough to stop just short. They teach you how to breathe with your stomach, not your chest. How to feel the wind with your ears. How to let silence stretch without fidgeting. It's strange, this focus on quiet, when all you've heard about berserkers is screaming and rage. But here's the twist. Rage isn't where you start. It's where you end up. Before the rage comes, Discipline, discomfort, denial. You have to learn how to empty yourself out so the fire has room to enter. It's less like stoking a flame and more like digging a pit for it to live in. You fast for days. You chew on bitter roots. You stay awake until your vision blurs. You sit in freezing rivers until your skin turns gray. Sometimes they blindfold you and leave you in the forest, whispering, "Find your way back," or "Don't." There are no stars on cloudy nights, and the trees creak like they're speaking. You begin to hallucinate. That's part of the plan. This is where the rituals begin. Not grand, not public. Quiet, strange things done in smoky huts with animal skulls hanging from the ceiling. You're handed a brew. It smells like wet bark and something worse. You drink. It burns. Then the world shifts. Faces warp. Your hands grow heavy. A bear growls somewhere behind your ribs. Not a real bear, but something you've let inside. That's what they want. That's the point. Not everyone comes back the same. Some go too far. One boy tried to climb a tree while blindfolded and snapped his leg like a dry twig. Another girl spoke only in riddles for a week after her vision. You don't know if this is magic or madness or some intense form of mental training, but it works. You feel different. Not stronger yet, but different. The old man with the missing teeth finally lets you spar. He doesn't say it, but you've passed some threshold. You square off with a boy your age, and the first time you land a blow that knocks him down something inside, you flares. Not pleasure, not cruelty, just a sudden clarity. The world narrows to movement and breath and blood humming in your ears. And then you feel the smallest trace of what the berserkers must feel. That tingling, that primal heat behind the eyes. But it's still caged, still leashed. That's good. That's the goal. They don't want wild dogs. They want guided storms. One afternoon, you're told to wrestle an older man. He's stocky, smells like old cheese, and has biceps like tree trunks. You laugh, thinking it's a joke. It's not. He pins you in 4 seconds and dislocates your shoulder in the process. While someone pops it back in, you grit your teeth and blink back tears. That night, you scream into your bed of furs, not from pain, but from shame. And yet the next morning, you show up again. It's not always physical. Some days are tests of patience. You have to balance stones on your back while crawling. You have to stand in icy water with a candle on your head and not let it blow out. One day, you're tasked with killing a rooster bare-handed. Not because it's hard, but because it's personal. You hesitate. It looks at you with eyes too human. Then someone behind you whispers, "If you can't kill this, how will you face a man?" You do it. It haunts you for days. They teach you songs, old ones, wordless ones with rhythms that echo the heartbeat. You chant them as you train, as you march, as you sit in solitude. You don't know where the songs came from, probably before words even mattered. But they stir something, like echoes from a time when your ancestors howled at the sky and dared the gods to listen. Eventually, your body changes. The baby fat melts, muscle tightens, your voice drops. Your face hardens in the mirror of the river. People start to step aside when you walk by. Some avoid your gaze. Others nod with something like respect or fear. And here's where a strange thing happens. You miss being invisible. You notice now that your rage simmers even when you're calm. A simple insult stings deeper. A shove in training feels like a challenge to your soul. But you don't lash out. Not yet. You remember the phrase they carved into the practice wall. Power held is more dangerous than power thrown. One evening, the old scarred teacher sits beside you, unexpectedly gentle. He tells you about a berserker he once knew, Ragnar Bearvoice, a man so lost in fury that he killed a friend during a feast. When he came to his senses, he wept until his lungs gave out. That's the other side of it, the teacher mutters. The fire burns everything, you included. So learn to carry water too. The next morning, you wake up before the sun and plunge your head into the stream. The water is sharp, cruel, perfect. You whisper the old songs under your breath. You feel the burn in your chest, not from rage, from discipline. And that, oddly enough, feels more powerful. The morning is colder than usual. Not just frost on your eyelashes cold, but the kind that seeps under your skin and clings to your spine. That's how you know something's different today. The sky hangs low and gray. The ravens are circling earlier than normal, and there's a strange tension in the longhouse, like even the wood knows what's coming. Your name is called, not shouted, not requested, called by the chieftain himself. You follow him through a veil of thick smoke into a small windowless hut where the elders gather. The moment you step in, your breath catches. Every eye is on you. In the center of the room, placed atop a stone slab, is the pelt. Not just any bear pelt. This one's old, worn, black as a moonless sky with patches of silver fur streaked like lightning scars. It's said to have belonged to Eirik the Hollow, a berserker so fierce that even wolves fled his scent. The pelt hasn't been touched in a generation. Until now. They don't explain the ritual in detail. Part of the ceremony is mystery. But you're told to kneel. Hands are placed on your shoulders. Oil is poured over your head, thick and stinking of herbs. Then a voice begins to chant. You recognize pieces of the old songs, but there's something deeper behind them now. A rhythm you can feel in your chest, as if your heart's been plugged into a war drum. The pelt is draped across your shoulders, and immediately, it's as if the world narrows. Sound dulls. The air grows heavier. You feel your skin prickling, muscles tightening without command. Your vision blurs at the edges, not with tears, but with something else, rage maybe, or the ghost of it. Then comes the drink. Everyone talks about it like it's a secret, but really it's just a nasty brew of herbs, mushrooms, and who knows what else. It hits your gut like a fist and climbs your spine like a fever. The room starts to spin. You try to breathe, but your breath doesn't feel like yours. Someone begins drumming, slow, steady, thunderous. Your hands curl into fists. Your jaw clenches. You feel heat radiating from your chest outward, like you've swallowed a coal. Then the voice of the elder closest to you hisses, "Let go." And so you do. At first, it feels like falling, like slipping off a cliff you didn't know you were standing on. Then something surges upward from inside you. Your arms jerk. Your legs twitch. You growl, or maybe you scream you don't know. The world melts away, replaced by instinct. Raw, animal instinct. Everything becomes sound, movement, scent. You are no longer a boy, or a girl, or even human. You are rage incarnate. They say the berserker trance is like being possessed by a beast. That's close, but not quite. It's more like the beast has always been there quietly chained, and someone finally gave it the key. You don't remember much of what happens next. Only flashes, faces twisted in awe or fear. Your own voice, guttural and deep. The taste of blood, your own, from biting your lip too hard. When you wake, you're outside, curled in a heap on the cold ground. Your body aches like it's been trampled by a dozen elk. Your hands are scraped raw. Your tunic is torn, and yet your heart is light, not joyful, just free. A woman kneels beside you, placing a damp cloth on your head. She whispers, You're different now, and you are. You know it. You feel it. There's something still simmering inside you like a second heartbeat. You've crossed a line and there's no going back. The next days blur together. You sleep a lot. You're hungrier than you've ever been. You start seeing things in people you never noticed before, the way they move, when they lie, the flicker of fear in their eyes when you approach. You don't speak much, not because you don't want to, but because words feel unnecessary. Your presence says enough. One evening, the village holds a small feast, not for you officially, but everyone knows what it's about. They bring out the last of the honey mead. There's music. You sit near the fire, silent, chewing dried meat, while others laugh and dance. One child sneaks up beside you and asks, "Is it true? Can you eat fire now?" You smirk. "Only if it disrespects me." That night, an elder tells you about Arna's Skull Splitter, a berserker who once charged an entire Saxon shield wall alone and lived. But he didn't live long, the elder adds, because he never learned when not to fight. The lesson lands. Here's the strange truth. No one tells you as a child becoming a berserker isn't about rage. It's about letting go just enough. The danger isn't in the fury, it's in forgetting how to return from it. Now, everyone watches you differently. People clear space for you when you walk. Some offer gifts, small ones, tokens of respect, or perhaps of fear. Others avoid you entirely, as if your gaze might ignite something. One man, a jealous cousin, perhaps tries to challenge you in jest. He makes a joke about bears being clumsy. You laugh, but there's a silence behind it. He doesn't joke again. You start sleeping with one eye open. Not because you're scared, because something in you stays alert now. Always. You don't remember how long you've been standing on the shore. Long enough that your boots have soaked through. Long enough that your fingers gripping the haft of your axe have gone numb, but not from fear. From anticipation. The longship sways gently in the gray-green surf behind you, the carved dragon head at its prow, snarling at the sky like it knows what's coming. The raid isn't a surprise. You've known it was coming for weeks, ever since a raven-haired scout came limping into the village with news of a wealthy monastery just across the sea. Gold, silver, fat sheep, and soft, terrified monks who don't even know how to swing a blade. Easy prey. But deep down, you know the riches aren't what stir your blood. It's the permission to unleash the beast again. You load into the ship with the others, some hardened veterans, some wide-eyed youths who try to hide their shaking hands. One of them stares at you like you're a story come to life. "Is it true?" he mutters. You don't feel pain. You shrug. Not until afterward. The sea is cruel as always. Waves slam against the hull, and salt spray stings your face. You huddle beneath a wet cloak, muscles tight, mind sharper than the wind. No one sings. This isn't a pleasure cruise. This is a storm wrapped in wood and iron. When land appears on the horizon, the silence breaks. Helmets are tightened. Weapons are unsheathed. You can smell the fear, on some of them fresh bitter like a fox caught in a snare. But your own heartbeat slows. Not speeds up, slows. You feel something ancient stirring. The cold clarity before chaos. The bear inside you shifts in its cage. You make landfall in the fog. There's no grand speech, no banners waving in the wind. Just the crunch of boots on wet sand, the creak of leather, and the low growl of readiness. You see the monastery in the distance, candlelight, flickering like a false sense of safety. They see you coming too late. One monk screams and runs. Another tries to bar the wooden door. You don't bother with finesse. You crash through like a living battering ram. Wood splinters. Panic explodes. Somewhere in the back of your mind, you register the smell of incense, and then it's gone, swept under the tide of red. The trance takes you again, but this time, it's sharper. You've been trained, conditioned, tested. You fight with more than rage. You fight with purpose. Your axe moves like an extension of your spine. You don't aim, you feel. One moment, you're shoving a door off its hinges. The next, you're inside a storeroom filled with treasures and terrified novices. But here's the strange part. You don't kill them all. You don't need to. You're not here to massacre. You're here to conquer. And sometimes, mercy terrifies more than blood. You let one of the monks live. He cowers behind a barrel, chanting something in a language you don't understand. You meet his eyes. He stops. Then you turn and walk away. Gold is gathered. Cups, rings, even a silver candlestick shaped like a dove. Some of the younger raiders laugh as they stuff their bags. You don't. Your blood is still humming. Your hands are still shaking. Not from exhaustion, but from restraint. Later, as the ship rocks its way back across the channel, someone passes you a flask. You drink. It burns, but not like the old hallucinogenic brew. Just mead, strong and sweet. You lean back, staring at the darkening sky, and think, is this what victory feels like? Because it doesn't feel like glory. It feels like emptiness, politely waiting for a refill. One of the older raiders, a man with a hawk tattoo on his scalp, sits beside you. He tells you about his first raid. Says he cried afterward, though no one saw. It's not the killing, he murmurs. It's the come down from the storm. You nod, though you're not sure you agree. For you, the storm is the clarity. The in-between, that's where the confusion creeps in. Back home, the celebration begins before your ship's even docked. Bonfires are lit. Children swarm the beach. Women throw flower wreaths onto the warriors. You're given a seat of honor near the fire, a horn full of mead, and someone whispers your name with reverence. For the first time, you realize you're not just a fighter. You're a myth in progress. But fame comes with a price. The next morning, you wake to find someone's painted your likeness on a shield. It's crude. Your face looks like a lopsided goat, but the intention is clear. You're being remembered, turned into a story. And stories have expectations. A boy you don't recognize asks if he can touch your axe. A farmer's wife leaves a carved bear-tooth token on your doorstep. You barely know her. You start to understand they don't see you anymore. They see the berserker, the one who loses himself in battle, the one who doesn't feel pain. And so you begin to wonder, how long until they expect you to lose yourself again? The applause fades. The meat runs out, and eventually the bonfires shrink to coals. Glory has a short memory span. It's not long before your village shifts back into routine mending nets, salting fish, arguing over goats. But you don't shift. Something inside you stayed on that coastline, caught in the scream of steel and the drumbeat of your own pulse. You try to help with chores again. Hammer a new wall post. Chop firewood. Tend to the animals. But your grip is too tight. Your swing too violent. The goats shy away from you now, even the big one that once butted everyone with impunity. You've returned from the raid intact, but changed in ways you can't name. At night, you lie awake. The fire crackles. The longhouse sleeps. But you stare into the smoke and see faces not of enemies, but of your own crew. How they looked at you when the frenzy took hold. With awe and caution. It's not fear of your strength that stings. It's the distance that strength creates. One morning, a child walks by your bench and drops the wooden toy you carved for him last year. He doesn't pick it up, doesn't look back. It's a small moment, but it lingers longer than most wounds. You don't even blame him. You barely recognize yourself. You speak less now, partly because silence feels easier, but partly because words feel too slow, too clumsy. You start seeing things other people miss. The way someone grips a tool just a little tighter when you walk past. How neighbors share glances after you turn your back. You haven't become a monster, but you've become a question, and that might be worse. There's a girl, or maybe a boy, you used to sit with by the river. Before all this, you liked their laugh. They liked the way you said nothing, and still seemed to understand. But now, when you pass, they nod politely, then walk faster. The bench by the river stays empty. The seer notices, of course. They always do. One evening, they call you into the smoke hut again. You expect another ritual, another vision, another test. Instead, they hand you a bowl of broth and say nothing for a long time. Then, with eyes that have watched generations burn and bloom, they say the trance is only supposed to visit, not stay. You nod, but you don't know how to uninvite it. That night, the dreams return. They're not violent, not loud, just wrong. You're running through snow, but your feet don't leave prints. You hear singing, but the mouths don't move. You wake covered in sweat, your nails dug into the fur mattress. The longhouse feels too small. The next day, you walk into the woods alone. No weapons, no armor, just the pelt. You sit by the stream, the one with the icy current that bites the skin clean. You try to remember who you were before the first raid. What did you fear back then? What did you want? All you recall is the cold, the hunger, and the yearning to become. Now that you've become, you wonder, what comes next? Some days are better. You laugh at a joke. You help an elder repair a roof. You teach a young boy how to grip an axe without slicing his own foot. For a moment, you forget the pressure simmering beneath your ribs. But it always returns. A tightness in the shoulders. A twitch in your fingers when someone raises their voice. You live like a pot that's always about to boil. You start hearing whispers about others, berserkers who didn't come back the same. One went into the mountains and never returned. Another drowned himself in the fjord. A third sits near the edge of the village, muttering to a tree stump he thinks is Odin. No one mocks him. They just leave food nearby and walk away quietly. You wonder if that's your future. And yet, sometimes, when no one's looking, you still feel the thrill. When you lift something heavier than any man should, when you run until your lungs burn, when you stand at the cliff's edge and dare the sea to challenge you. There's still pride in the power. But pride is a lonely companion. You try the river bench again. Sit there for hours. Eventually, the person with the laugh shows up. They don't speak right away. Just sit nearby, plucking a reed apart. Then they ask, "Do you still hear it?" You don't ask what it is. You just nod. And that's enough. There's a strange comfort in being seen but not feared. You realize you've missed that most of all. That evening, you carve another wooden toy. You leave it by the doorstep of the child who once dropped the first one. The next day, it's gone. You've spent most of your life mastering violence, so peace feels suspicious. It creeps in without asking, stretching its limbs, in the quiet moments when there's no feast to attend, no raid to plan, no enemy to intimidate. You try to pretend it's a reward after all you've earned it. But the truth is, peace makes you twitchy. The days grow longer, the snow melts, and suddenly your world smells of wet earth and wood smoke instead of iron and blood. The rhythm of the village changes. Babies are born, roofs are patched, and the younger warriors start sparring more often. They look at you the way you once looked, at the old berserkers with awe-envy and an unhealthy hunger to prove themselves. And here you are, stuck somewhere between two identities, no longer the reckless novice, not quite the old wolf. You're a legend still breathing, and that makes people nervous. The thing is, in times of peace, people expect you to behave normally, smile at the market, give advice at the training ring, nod thoughtfully when someone asks if the barley looks good this year. You do all these things. You even try small talk. But every now and then, someone touches your shoulder too suddenly or speaks too loudly near your ear, and the old fire flares. You don't lash out, but your jaw tightens, your eyes flash, and people notice. So you retreat to where peace feels more honest, the mead hall. Ah, the mead hall. If berserker life had a second religion, this would be its temple. Long benches overflowing mugs, questionable singing, and even more questionable dancing. You sit near the edge where the shadows gather and the noise doesn't press too hard. Someone passes you a horn. You drink. It burns good. Someone tells a joke about a Saxon sheep. You laugh genuinely. You look around and realize the faces are changing. A new generation is rising louder, leaner, full of muscle and ambition. And they keep glancing at you like you're a stone statue in a sacred grove. Revered, untouchable. One of them finally gets bold enough to approach. He's got a patchy beard and the overconfidence of someone who's never actually bled for real. They say you ripped the door off the Lindisfarne monastery with your teeth. You raise an eyebrow. It was with my shoulder, and it was already half rotted. He blinks, then grins. Still impressive. You shrug. It's not the myth they want. It's the permission. The permission to believe they too can become something terrifying and worshipped. You remember that hunger, and you remember the cost. Later that night, someone plays a stringed instrument badly, and people start dancing. The room smells of sweat mead, roasted lamb, and something burned in the fire pit that might have once been bread. A woman grabs your hand, or maybe a man. Honestly, it doesn't matter. They spin you into the dancing mess, laughing as if you're not a living weapon, as if you're just another villager blowing off steam. You let them. You even grin. There's a kind of magic in being seen as human again. Not feared, not worshipped, just tolerated. Afterward, when the hall empties out and the last embers crackle in the hearth, you sit with your back against a post. One of the elders shuffles over. He smells like onions and goat. Used to be, you couldn't sit still, he says. Now look at you, quiet as a cow in winter. You nod, unsure if it's a compliment. He leans in. The best warriors learn to love the quiet, because they know the noise will come again. And sure enough, it does. Peace doesn't last. It never does. Word spreads a rival clan across the fjord insulted your chieftain, accused your people of stealing land sheep and dignity not necessarily in that order. Suddenly the hall buzzes again. Swords are sharpened. Oaths are made. The quiet days dry up like morning frost. You're not asked to fight. You're expected to. They don't even ask. They just assume you'll lead the front line, tear through enemies like a scythe through wheat, and come back bathed in someone else's blood. And part of you wants to, but part of you hesitates. You think of the child with the wooden toy, the river bench. The question, do you still hear it? You do. You always do. But lately, you've also started hearing something else yourself, the one buried beneath the roar. So you go out to the woods again, not to hide, to ask. Ask the gods. Ask the earth. Ask the wind if the beast must always wake when called. The wind says nothing, of course. It never does. But as you sit there watching a spider build its tiny kingdom between two branches, you feel the answer settle quietly inside you. You're still a berserker. But that doesn't mean you have to burn every time someone hands you a match. The next morning, your boots crunch over frostbitten grass as you return from the woods. You're not sure what you were expecting, to feel clarity resolve, but instead, there's just this strange emptiness, not cold, not painful, more like a quiet echo where once there was thunder. The village is already humming. War preparations do that. There's an energy in the air like charged storm clouds, young warriors testing their swings, elders sharpening blades with more care than speed. The blacksmith is bellowing about bent axe heads and ungrateful sons. It's oddly comforting, this chaos. Familiar even. But when people see you, they stop. Not entirely, but there's always a half-second pause, like they're waiting to see who you are today, the bear, or the quiet one who walks through snow without leaving a trail. You speak little, but you watch everything. The way they're planning, the faces they send to negotiate, the offerings they leave at the seer's hut. It doesn't smell like strategy, it smells like pride. And pride, as you've come to learn, is just panic with better clothes. Then the unexpected happens. They challenge you, not the rival clan, not some foreign raider, one of your own, a berserker in training, younger, stronger, full of piss and thunder and compliments laced with venom. He bows just enough to follow protocol, then smirks just enough to betray his real intention. They say you're slowing down, he says, but I want to learn from the best. Let's see what the best still has. Everyone hears it. You feel the ripple it sends across the courtyard. A few stop working. A few don't dare look up. The fire inside you flickers, not rage but memory. You've been this boy before, the one desperate to feel immortal, the one who thought pain was proof of destiny. So you nod and step into the ring. No one announces the fight, but within minutes everyone's circled up. The chieftain crosses his arms. The seer stands stone-faced. You stretch your fingers. The younger berserker rolls his shoulders like a show pony. You don't hate him. That's the worst part. You don't feel insulted. You feel pity. He lunges first, fast, loud, predictable. You sidestep. He swings again, overcommitted. Beautiful form, no restraint. His blade grazes your tunic. You duck, grab his wrist, and suddenly he's on the ground, staring up at you with a mix of fear and admiration. Not because he lost, but because it happened without fire or frenzy. You didn't roar. You didn't break his nose. You simply handled him. And that's when you realize something strange. Control isn't the opposite of rage. It's the final form of it. There's a murmur from the crowd. The younger warriors look confused. The older ones nod. One even cracks a grin. You offer the boy your hand. He takes it. Doesn't look you in the eye. Not yet. But he will. That night, no one speaks of the fight, but they offer you more space at the fire. They pass you the first horn of mead. Respect not out of fear, but understanding. You remember what the seer once said, The trance is only supposed to visit. You finally understand what that means. You've been training for years, not to become the beast, but to carry it. And now you carry it like a king bears his crown, not because it makes you powerful, but because no one else can bear the weight. A few days later, you walk past a boy whittling a wooden bear. He glances up and says, "Is it true berserkers feel no pain?" You pause, then say, "We feel it. We just don't let it decide who we are." He nods, even if he doesn't get it yet. That's fine. One day he will. You catch a glimpse of yourself in a puddle, just a blur of fur scar and shadow. And for the first time in a long while, you don't look away. There's something unsettling about fighting someone who knows the same fire you do, the same rhythm of breath before the fury strikes, the same narrowed eyes, the same subtle tremble of the fingers just before surrendering to something ancient and hungry. So when the rival berserker walks into your village one dull morning, no one laughs, no one scoffs, because everyone sees it immediately. He's real, not one of the overeager pups swinging blades for glory, not a loud drunk with more muscles than sense. He walks like a storm cloud, quiet, dense, measured. He carries no shield, just an axe nicked and worn, and a fur cloak blackened at the edges, like it's tasted fire. He's not here to raid. He's here for you. Word spreads faster than the wind off the fjord. By midday, the longhouse is practically vibrating, not from shouting or cheering, but from expectation. They all know what this means. Two warriors touched by the same madness, facing off not for conquest, but to see whose spirit the gods will still favor. You try to eat something. You chew a bit of dried meat and forget to swallow. Across the room, you see him again, speaking to no one staring at the hearth. He doesn't blink much. You respect that. As the sun sinks behind the ridge, they clear the ring. No one speaks. Even the children are quiet. You step in barefoot. So does he. No armor, no ceremony. Just the two of you, half naked in the evening cold, the bare pelts brushing the ground like trailing shadows. Your breath fogs in the air slow and even. Feel your pulse deepen, that familiar rumble in the chest, the beast rattling its cage. But you don't let it out. Not yet. He moves first, and it's nothing like the flashy swings of the younger ones. It's efficient, calculated, the kind of violence that only comes from restraint. You parry, barely. The clash echoes like thunder in a church. The village doesn't cheer. They hold their breath. You dance around him every step, careful every feint a question. He answers them wrong on purpose sometimes just to test you. He's smarter than you hoped, and stronger than you like. Then you both break. It happens fast. He lunges. You duck. He pivots. You ram your shoulder into his ribs and the world folds into chaos. Fists, elbows, teeth, guttural snarls, a blur of fur and skin and blood. You taste copper, smell dirt, hear your own voice low and ancient chanting a name you didn't know you knew. The trance hits hard. You don't remember your body falling, only that your mind lifts, like watching yourself from above a hurricane made of grunts and impact. You see his eyes wide now, less certain. He feels it too. That danger you both brought into the ring. The fire with no master. But here's the difference. You've danced with this flame longer. You've named it, sheltered it, bound it with threadbare wisdom and scar-taught patience. You pull back. He doesn't. He swings wild, too wild. You step inside the arc and bring your elbow into his jaw. It lands with the dull crack of something inevitable. He drops. The silence that follows is the kind you rarely hear. Not relief, not sorrow. Something in between, like watching a god blink. He stirs, breathes, alive, but still. You step back, not victorious, surviving. Someone calls your name, but you don't respond. You're still listening to your ribs, your heartbeat, the echo of the trance, fading like a tide pulling away from shore. The seer nods once. You don't look at them. You already know what they'll say. You left the beast on a leash, and that's why you lived. You help him to his feet. He looks at you with something close to admiration, maybe even gratitude, then walks away without a word. You understand? The ring isn't where rivals die. It's where truths are revealed. Later that night, you sit by the fire with your hands still wrapped, staring at the dancing flames. The mead tastes sweeter than usual. Someone's playing a soft tune on a flute made from bone. You think about all the times you let the rage win, the times it nearly cost you everything. And now, after all that, the greatest victory came not from unleashing the fury, but from choosing not to. The others watch you, but differently now. Less like you're dangerous, more like you're trustworthy, which for a berserker is rarer than gold. You lean back, exhale slow, and feel for the first time in months, completely present. Not haunted by the past, not chasing the next battle. Just here, quiet, breathing. The sky's the color of ash the morning you leave. No songs are sung, no banners waved, no children chase the boat down the beach. There's no need. This isn't a raid of celebration, it's a reckoning. One last voyage, one final offering to the gods, or fate, or whatever, still listens when a berserker whispers into the wind. You climb aboard the longship without ceremony. The wood creaks beneath you, familiar, like the aching joints of an old friend. Around you, the crew is quieter than usual. Some younger warriors whisper about you, about your duel, your control, your victory, but they keep their distance. You're not their peer. You're something else. Something they respect, but don't yet understand. The destination is Francia, a coastal fortress rumored to hold riches beyond comprehension and warriors to match. You've heard that before, of course. Every chieftain hypes the next raid like it's the last feast of the world. But this time, something feels different. Not in the wind, not in the waves, but in your bones. The journey is slow. The sea doesn't rage, it sulks. You watch the horizon unmoving for hours at a time. Memories rise, uninvited, your first trance, your first kill the boy with the bear carving the river bench, the fight you chose not to finish. They all blend together into one long breath held beneath the surface. A boy offers you dried apples. You take them. He doesn't ask you anything, just sits nearby, peeling bark off the oar in slow curls. It's enough. You land just before dawn. The fortress is a speck against the mist stone walls, spiked gates, arrogant banners waving as if they believe the sea can't reach them. It will. You will. But this time, you hesitate, not out of fear, but out of knowing. You've learned to measure a raid not by the spoils, but by what it costs. And something about this one feels heavy. Too perfect. Too planned. The kind of trap that waits with open arms. You tell the chieftain your concerns. He grunts, offers you a chance to stay behind. You almost take it. Almost. But then the boy, with the barked oar, glances back at you, eyes wide with a kind of terrified faith. And so, you go. The battle is chaos. Always is. Screams, horns, fireblood mud, prayers in foreign tongues. You lose track of time. You lose track of yourself. You find the trance. But this time, it's reluctant. The rage doesn't flood in. It waits, as if asking permission. You give it. Partly. Just enough. Your axe sings. Your body moves before thought. You knock down a knight in full armor, crush a door, catch an arrow with your arm, and barely feel it. Around you, others fall. Friends, enemies. The boy with the barked oar vanishes into the smoke. You call for him once. No answer. And then betrayal. You hear it before you see it. A horn blast from the wrong direction. Your flank. Your flank. The allies you trusted have turned. Paid off. Promised something shinier than loyalty. The chieftain falls. The others scatter. You stand alone for a moment in the courtyard, blood dripping from your chin, surrounded by enemy steel. But the rage stays quiet, not dormant, not absent, waiting. You drop your axe and raise your hands. The enemy hesitates. They know your reputation. One twitch, and they'll strike. But you don't twitch. You speak. Calmly, slowly. In the little Frankish you know. You offer surrender. Not because you're broken, but because you've finally become something more terrifying than a berserker. You've become a thinker. They bind you, drag you to the gates, strip the bear pelt from your back. The commander spits at your feet. You meet his eyes and smile not mockingly, but as if to say, you have no idea what you've just inherited. Because a berserker who's lived this long, who's chosen not to kill, who knows the fire and carries it like a cup of still water, that warrior doesn't need freedom to be dangerous. As they lock the gates behind you, you murmur an old chant, not for escape, not for rescue, but for balance. The gods may not hear it. The world may not understand it, but you do. You're buried on a hill that doesn't belong to your people, not in a place of honor, not on a ship set aflame, not under a cairn built by trembling hands chanting your name. Just earth, foreign, damp, and silent. A mound carved into the countryside of Francia, where the trees look too polite and the sky never quite matches the one you were born beneath. But let's rewind. You didn't die in the fortress. They thought you would, that you should. But something about your restraint unnerved them. You weren't the frothing madman of their tales. You didn't gnash your teeth or curse their bloodline. You simply stared, waited, said little, and they didn't know what to do with that. So instead of executing you, they paraded you, a chained monster, a curiosity. You became a story told in whispers, at court the berserker who spoke like a poet and didn't flinch when flogged. Nobles came to look, some poked. One even tried to buy you, but you didn't break. You didn't perform. You didn't roar. Instead, you remembered. Not just the violence, but the stillness, the river, the spider in the woods, the song sung at the feast no one else remembered the words to. It was in the silence of your cell weeks later that the fever took you, not from wounds, from time, from exhaustion. The body you'd pushed beyond limits for years finally whispered enough, and you listened. You didn't rage in your final moments. You didn't scream into the sky or beg for a Valkyrie to descend. You simply lay there wrapped in the last scraps of your dignity and the memory of a younger version of yourself, dreaming of snow-covered longhouses and salted fish. And when your breath left you, the guards outside the cell paused, not because they knew what had happened, but because for a moment the air felt lighter. They buried you quietly, no name on the stone, just a mound. But here's the part. No one else knows. Someone followed you from home. That boy, with the barked door, he survived. Found his way back. Years passed, but your name, your truth lingered. Not the berserker myth, the man. So one day, he returned to Francia, found the grave, marked it, and whispered a song beside it. The one you used to chant before battle. The one with no words, just rhythm and breath. Then he left behind something small, a carved wooden bear, rough, uneven, clearly shaped by unskilled hands, but honest. And it sits there, still half buried by time, half exposed to wind and rain, watching over your final place of rest, like an old friend who never stopped believing. Because the truth is, you were never just the rage. You were the one who carried it and survived long enough to put it down. And now, long after your name has been blurred by legend, someone sits by the fire sharpening a blade telling your story. Not with fear, not with awe, but with understanding. Because you showed them that even the fiercest beast can learn to rest. And now, as your eyes grow heavier and the fire in your mind begins to dim, let the echoes of the north fade softly into silence. You've walked through the life of a Viking berserker, born of ice shaped by fury and tempered by time. You've felt the rage, the quiet, the hunger, and the healing. But now, the axe is set down, the bear sleeps, and peace takes its rightful place. The storm has passed. Let that silence wrap around you like a warm fur cloak. There are no more battles to fight tonight, only dreams to drift into slow calm and endless like the sea. Breathe deep. You've survived. You've lived. And now, you rest. Good night, warrior.